Okay, we'll get going in just a minute. We'll let people give a chance to log on. I got a notice from Facebook today. Apparently there's a bell button or something you can click to make sure you get notifications when we are live. And because I don't see us live on Facebook, I don't always see it. So I'm trying to figure out what that is. Yeah, I can't see it on my own page. So whatever it is. Okay, so good afternoon. It is Thursday at 4 o'clock. I hope everyone had a really good evening. It's just amazing weather today. I had lunch in West Haven right on the water, which is stunning out. Rich, what are your thoughts on the Brantford tax collector? We'll talk about that probably a little more next week. There's another article coming out. The issue with the tax collector is she did things that were clearly wrong based on an independent audit, not based on my analysis, an independent audit. I have not seen a lot of coverage of that, which is unfortunate, but I think we do have some bias in local media. That said, Joe Mooney is the chairman of the Board of Finance. He is leading a group that is going to look into this. Just so you know, the tax collector is a Democrat. Joe Mooney is a Democrat. OPM, which oversees the audits of the town, are run by Democrats. So before anybody gets into political bullshit on this, Democrats are looking into the actions of a Democratic tax collector. And we'll talk about that in far more detail, maybe a little bit after this interview and maybe a lot more detail next week. It's a serious issue. There's no question about that. That said, though, we don't want to take away from what we're doing today. Everybody gets their kind of own episode here. We have interviewed, I think, 6 Board of Ed members so far. And so we're going to bring on Laura Troidle in a second. There's no surprises here. A lot of the questions are the same. We typically leave out political party in this discussion so that we can just analyze their answers, look at their experience, and see where their views on the current Board of Ed, the current administration, and what they might do differently. So I'm going to bring Laura on now. Give me 1 second here. Okay, hi. Laura, can you hear me? How are you?
Yes, good. How are you?
I'm very good.
Outside.
Outside today was beautiful. Ate at a restaurant. I forgot the name of the restaurant. I posted on my Facebook page, but and I ordered something like a shrimp scampi thing. No pasta, but it was phenomenal. It was delicious, and it's right on the water, which was spectacular. You couldn't beat that. You forget you're in West Haven a little bit when in certain locations. So it was a really good day. That said, glad to have you on. First of all, congratulations on running for office. Not an easy thing to do, to put your name on a ballot. Then you have people like me that get to criticize you, and it's not always an easy thing to deal with. But you're one of 8 members for the seats that are open. I've been very impressed with all the members so far, and I'm no question I will be with you as well, and be interested to see what your thoughts are on the Board of Ed. However, before we get into the current board and what you might want to see different, give us a little bit of your background. What do you do professionally, personally, that sort of thing going forward?
So first and foremost, I'm a mom of 2 kids who are graduates of Brantford Public School and wife to my husband, Kurt. I'm also a physician assistant. I work for Metabolism Associates, High T. I see you watching. In New Haven. I've worked there for 30 years as a physician assistant. We're a practice that deals with people with kidney disease. So I work predominantly at a Yale New Haven hospital, and I have been very involved with caring for patients with kidney disease, advocating for them in the dialysis population. A lot of them last with us for 20 years, and we really get to know each other. We see each other in the hospital, outpatient dialysis unit. We form special relationships, and we really see each other at our best and at our worst in the hospital setting. And my background in the education arena is, as you probably know, I did run for Board of Ed many years ago, when my kids were small. I first got interested in the Board of Ed when my children, especially my youngest son, was getting involved in his math curriculum in the elementary school. And I was very concerned about the type of math he was learning. My husband's an engineer, and I'm in medicine, and we were kind of a little perplexed with the type of math and the type of homework he had. And then as we started digging, we found out a little bit more, and we were very concerned, became very vocal, and started going to Board of Ed meetings. And long story short, I ended up running for Board of Ed, and I lost. I ran against John Prinz, actually. He's been on the Board of Ed for a long time. But after that, I got very involved in the school PTA. I was PTA president at John Sliney School, and we started discussing math education, but overall, like education as a whole, and predominantly focusing on test scores with the kids. And when we were talking about the test scores, we did see that there was a difference in the scores at the different schools. Mm-hmm. Tisco had higher scores. Sliney was kind of in the middle, and Murphy was lagging behind. And we were getting very concerned with this funny math program ongoing, that this would further the divide. And we were very concerned. And then I started going to Board of Ed meetings and realizing that I was kind of talking to a wall at the Board of Ed meetings. A lot of parents got involved with us. And long story short, I learned a lot about policy with the Board of Ed, the CABE policy. And we finally figured out ways to get the Board of Ed interested. It took us a long time to even figure out which meetings to go when parents could speak up. And we got very frustrated in the process, but I ended up getting more involved with my kids' education, away from this a little bit. I was always involved with a lot of their sports activities and booster clubs throughout high school for both my kids, with their track and cross country stuff, and just trying to be more involved with my kids at that point. But then this past year, COVID happened, and I started seeing parents getting upset again. And it seemed to be over the same kind of policy type issues, different issue, COVID and school closings, much more severe than the math education that I had an opinion on. But I started seeing the parents really getting upset again, and it reminded me of my math days. And now my kids are in college. One's out, one's still in a senior year, and I'm still very busy working full time. I put 100% into what I do at work. Come home exhausted, but I really felt a calling. This was a sign for me to get back in this, and I feel like I can bring stuff to the table here.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about that math program, though. So that was called Investigations at the time. Am I correct?
Yes, that was, yes. It was like a constructivist type of math program, and a lot of it involved estimating and different ways to do addition and subtraction. They never learned long division, funny ways of doing multiplication that took many more steps than the standard algorithm.
So where did that? Good. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I got involved nationwide. I started finding that this was a program that was implemented throughout the country, and there were parent groups that were speaking up against it throughout the country. And I ended up getting very involved in a lot of different math systems. Parent groups throughout the country, and getting a lot of feedback about that, and dealing with a lot of different mathematicians as well.
So where do we stand now? Is the investigation still taught in Brantford? Has it run its course?
So from what I hear from one Board of Ed member, said that they are no longer implementing it the way they did, but that they are using some of the theory behind it to help kids better understand the algorithms, but they are supplementing with other standard algorithms. But my kids are not in the elementary school.
Okay. Right.
It's been a while, and I don't know where that stands. I have not paid attention to that. It is a concern of mine, of course, but I don't know where that stands.
Yeah, I don't either. Kids get older, so that makes sense. You're not quite taught the same thing as they get older. I do want to point out one thing where you said that you ran against John Prinz. I don't know, what was that, 8 years ago or 10 years, whatever it was. Many people may not realize, and I have to do a better job explaining this to a lot of the audience. This is not 8 members that run and then you pick 6. Some people are running against somebody in particular on this ballot. So we'll go over that ballot in a little more detail later. I've interviewed people basically on their own, but you guys are against certain people at times. And so I'll make that clear as we go forward. Okay, so interesting. Let's talk about what's going on now. Obviously, many parents were upset that school wasn't reopened. They may be upset with communication with regards to COVID or the superintendent. Are there particular issues going on now in the school district that you say, listen, this is what got me going. This is why I have to get back involved?
I think just seeing the parents going to the Board of Ed meetings and becoming frustrated. I have been following the Unmask Our Kids group and talking to several of the parents there. And they are very frustrated with their issues. But last year, it was more in the spring when the parents just wanted the schools opened. I became aware of Jennifer Ann's page and her very good advocacy for the kids and getting the schools open and speaking up and going to all these Board of Ed meetings. That she is one who really I noticed on Facebook, and I started following what was going on there. And I really got very interested in that part of getting the kids open. All I could do was say, and I can't tell you how many times I said this, thank God my kids are older. Thank God my kids aren't in school. Can you imagine being in a pandemic and working? And I work in a hospital setting. Like, what would I have done? My husband had to go to work. He would have been able to be home a little, but he still needed to go in. And then I would have to, how would I be handling the kids at home? My mother's elderly. What would I have done? And when I started seeing that East Haven and North Branford and some of the other local schools were open more than they were hybrid, I was questioning, why not Branford? And that's what really made me say, I need to start following this. And I felt the frustrations of the parents in dealing with the administration and central office, knowing how things went for me with the math in the past, and also with the Board of Ed, and seeing some of the same old faces there, wondering if things were going to change, even though we were dealing with phenomenally different issues.
Mm-hmm. On those issues, and there's 2 fairly controversial issues in towns around us, not necessarily in Branford, but the Unmask Our Kids group did get fairly vocal in Branford. Where do you stand on that with regards to masks in school, especially with your medical background?
So, right now that we're under a state mandate, we have to have masks. I wear one at work. I wear one in the hospital. It's going to be a long time before we can't wear one. But I understand the parents' frustration with the masks with the kids. We're adults. It's a lot easier for us to understand, and we're more at risk for complications of COVID and spreading COVID. But I do understand the need for the masks at this time. If you look online, you're going to find data supporting whatever you want to say. You're going to find data saying that masks are no good. You're going to find data that masks are harmful. You're going to find data that masks are very effective. And it's very hard because we don't have like the traditional case controlled study with this group was in a mask, this one wasn't. We have retrospective historical data, and then we look at different countries that are doing different things. But the thing that really strikes me with the Unmask Our Kids group is they are passionate about what they want, what they're concerned about. They're very passionate about it. They come to the Board of Ed, they speak what they want to say, but they don't feel like they're getting listened to. And that's what I've been hearing for a lot of the members. It's not necessarily the outcome. They understand the predicament we're in, but it's more, they just want to be understood. There is kids that are hearing impaired, who really depend on reading people's lips. And that is very helpful. My son himself is hearing impaired. And I know when he was learning younger, in his younger years, before we identified it, he actually was reading lips because we knew he wasn't hearing certain things, yet he would move his lips a certain way. So I think that stuff is really important. And I think we are recognizing it. And I know the Board of Ed and the superintendent and central office is sympathetic to this type of thing. There's just no easy solution for it with these mandates. I think we need to be understanding of these parents and their concerns, and we need to be thinking forward. At what point do we need to be at where we can start thinking about loosening some of these restrictions? We aren't there right now. Community transmission is still high. Hospitalizations and are significantly down. They're declining. They did go up again this, as we know, in August, September. The numbers are dropping steadily now. They're kind of hovering at a certain level right now, but I'm hoping it goes back down to next to nothing again. We've seen wave after wave. With the CDC themselves were also from the beginning, and I can understand the parents' frustration. When COVID first was coming and we were watching what was going on in Europe, and when we were watching what was going on in New York City, so close to us, the CDC was saying, don't wear masks. There's no need to wear masks. We don't need to. We know that's because there was probably not enough PPE, but it gave a kind of a mixed message right at that point to people. And then some people started wearing masks in the hospital, and we would get told, you cannot wear that mask. You can wear it in the patient's room, but you have to take it off when you go out. You're scaring people. People in the hospital were actually told that. One of my attendings who I work with was wearing a mask early on because of her concern. And she was told she can't do that. Then we moved to, you can wear a mask in the patient's room. Then we moved to, you can't enter the hospital without a mask. But the COVID was already here. We were already peaking and having huge complications. And I am very sympathetic to COVID itself. I've seen horrific things with COVID that I will probably never get over seeing. So I do want to prevent COVID. I'm not being lackadaisical here. I just think parents have been getting a mixed message. And again, this spring, everyone's vaccinated. You can go back outside. You don't need to wear a mask. We don't need to. Delta was already here at that time, but it wasn't skyrocketing like it did over the summer throughout certain parts of the country. And then suddenly, no, you need to wear a mask. Now it's kind of optional in Connecticut. You don't have to wear one in certain stores if you don't want to. And it's up to the stores. It's a personal thing, up to the stores. And I kind of like that. You can go where you're comfortable, or you can stay out of stores if you want altogether. So I do we have to listen to people, and we have to be forward thinking. And I think if we had some communication from central office and from the Board of Ed saying, we hear you, we're listening to you, we're not quite there, but we do understand you. And down the road, when cases hit certain amounts, when the state starts thinking, we'll speak up to the state and we'll let them know what our data looks like, and we think we can start unmasking our kids. There's got to come a point where we get to that. I don't see how we can just continue this. I do think the virus is going to stay with us for a while. Okay. There's going to be cases that keep popping up. The goal is no hospitalizations and deaths. That's the big goal. And we keep thinking we're reaching it, but things keep coming back. We have to just be very careful and vigilant, follow our data, follow our numbers, and having hope. I think that's what the most important thing is having some kind of hope here.
Okay. Part of the times, from an administration standpoint, it's hard so people don't feel heard unless they get their way. And so in some cases, it's that fine line of how do you let people know they're being heard, despite the fact that they're not going to. The school announced early on we were going to demand masks for students in this school year. That likely wasn't going to change. How do you do that? How do you convey to a group of people, we're hearing you, we understand what you're saying, we understand what your concerns, but we're not going to change or adjust on those just yet? How do you convey that?
Well, I think you have to address the big concerns that are real, the kids who are having trouble, hearing impaired kids that are really having trouble physically wearing the mask. You have to address those first. And then you need to just follow data, and you have to just start saying, showing people that the data is good. The biggest goal that we have to keep in mind here, and that the most important thing, is keeping schools open. And we need to do everything that we can to keep schools open. That's the most important thing, so that we don't see kids spreading this. We don't know when kids get it, if they are spreading it through classes. We can look historically back at September's data, and we can say, this is what we saw. There's no evidence of spreading amongst classrooms. These are the things that the precautions we took, and we think that they're working. And we need to continue to let people understand that this is our thought process, and why we're insisting on this right now, because the state is telling us that we have to do this. But that we have to also be looking at our data and just saying, this is what we don't know if masks are prevented the kids from getting it in a certain classroom. If one kid gets it, we don't know if that kid got it over the weekend because they went to the Durham Fair and then they got COVID there, and then they never came to class. They got a fever on Monday. I do also think that we don't highlight some of the things that we can do much more proactively, that I think everyone agrees on, is washing our hands, using the Purell, but using soap and water throughout, after they come in from recess, when they've touched dirty things on the ground that Purell might not necessarily work on, and emphasizing for parents that you should be checking your kids' temperature in the morning before they go to school. Things that we can do proactively to really discourage kids who may be sick from coming to school because of the potential consequences of that.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about Hamlet, and you ran against John Prince. We'll talk about both of those individuals, because as a board member, you're going to do two things. You'll be over the superintendent, and you'll be voting on a new chair once you take office, or whoever takes office. How would you rate the job that Hamlet Hernandez has done so far, based on your viewpoint?
So I've had very little interaction with Hamlet. My initial interaction with him has been when he was first hired. It was when the math issue was going on, because we had Superintendent Halligan.
Halligan.
And she resigned and retired, I believe. And he came on board, and I met with him because I think he was a math teacher at some point. So I thought I had an ear right at that point. So I met with him initially early on to let him know that my concerns were. And I think he knew who I was at that point, because I had been very vocal about the math education. But that was the end of the conversation. There were other things that came up, and I never received. I would send some information, and I didn't receive information back. Now, I know he's busy. He can't respond to everything, but I just kind of felt like that I wasn't getting any kind of response at that point. And then I also felt that I needed to spend more time with my kids, educating them properly. So I needed to step away at that time. I have had no interaction really with the rest of my kids' education in Branford. Things ran smoothly. I've had no issues, but there was one other thing that came up over the years where I was against early on. I think every parent would shoot me if I said this, but I'm not a big fan of having cell phones in the classroom. The kids have become addicted to these things, and so have I. So I could be a hypocrite for saying that, but I did speak up about that at one point. I did start getting concerned about the cell phones in the classroom, but that's water under the bridge now. But there was no particular issue with Hamlet. As far as judging him for his performance, I just can tell from what the parents are saying that they're frustrated because there was no communication. All they wanted to know was, when are we going to open schools? What is the plan? And it kept saying, well, in another, in a couple of months, we'll think about it in a couple of months. And as a parent who's got a busy job, I could sympathize with the parents being upset, like not knowing what's going to happen. Parents have to make plans, but also the amount of education that parents may feel their kids are behind on because they couldn't get to school. Not every kid has the same home life, we know. Some kids probably have a lot of support at home, and some kids probably had no support at home. And those are the that was very concerning to me with no plan. And then watching what happened in around us, that other districts were open full and we weren't. So based on that, I was very concerned that there was no plan. But I am not as privy to any of the other issues over the years because I haven't been involved with any of that until this spring.
So you've watched, I'm sure, Board of Ed meetings over the last 6-7 months expecting to run for office. You ran against John Prinz years ago. How would you analyze if you had to vote for a chair going forward? Would you support John and the job he's done, or would you look for another direction?
I think at this point we need to look in another direction. The current members on the board, several of them have spoken up to him about concerns. Parents have been going, and some of their I know Tim and Peter have been speaking up about having communication with the parents and have been actually saying things. There was one board meeting where I think there was something said to Peter Burdun that was a little bit insulting. And I'll leave that between Peter and John. But it came off as a little bit condescending to people watching it. I don't remember the specifics of that particular incident. But anyhow, I do think when you see parents struggling before, and he was not chair at that time. Frank Carano was chair at that time when I was concerned, but John was his sitting near him. He was one of the members on the board, and he did nothing to help change the manner of that board. And it seems to me same old, and we're still dealing with policy issues and things that or parents are upset, and how if another issue comes aboard, we need to be prepared and a better way of interacting with parents, so that we have a little bit more two-way, three-way, whatever dialogue with people.
I do want to ask you about what's happening in Guilford, because while it's not happening in Brantford yet, there's some rumblings, but not really, on CRT and critical race theory. Do you have a stance on how race is taught in school, whether CRT is used, or would you be for it, against it, that sort of thing? And what are your thoughts on the Guilford race?
So I'm watching what's going on in Guilford, and it's just chaos right now. And that's not something we need. We need to have, I'll get to my thoughts on it in a second, but we need to have a lot of clarity. We need to be recognizing where our kids are not doing well, and recognizing kids that are actually excelling, and keep it, let the kids keep excelling. And we need to keep parents, and we need to recognize kids who may be slipping behind. We don't need chaos right now. But I'd like to add, I have read a lot of things about critical race theory, and there's a lot of different names that are becoming, there's equality or social justice in education and things like that, or they're trying to change the name in certain formats. But there was an article in the Washington Post, and it interviewed a bunch of parents in Loudoun County, Virginia, which I'm taking as, I haven't read a whole heck of a lot about it, but in Loudoun County, Virginia, I guess that's one of the strongholds on critical race theory. There's a lot of issues there, but there is this one person who's an Emily Curtis, who worked for the Clinton administration. She's a lifelong Dem. And she, went on in that article to talk about how she disagreed that anyone who disagrees with critical race theory is a conservative or is a racist. She felt that she found it really difficult that they were using terms in school about white supremacy and systemic racism with certain populations, especially with younger kids. And she really worried about the classroom potentially dividing the kids by race based on these kinds of discussions, because these are kids and they don't necessarily see this. I think what we need to do is bring a lot of these historical events that may have been, not discussed when we took history, when I took history, or currently. Maybe there's some events that have happened and that need to be discussed, and we do need to do these things. But when you're starting to tell, some kids that they're because they're of one race, they're responsible for what's going on in another race, or insinuating that when kids don't have those critical thinking skills to really develop that, to understand that. And then you tell another population that they're victims. That's not giving anybody any kind of encouragement. She went on to say, and I agree with her, that, and it's going to kind of give the message to some of these kids that race decides their fate. And that's not true. We don't want kids thinking that. We want kids dreaming that they can decide their fate, that it's their responsibility, and that kids with opportunity can have this. And it was Martin Luther King who said, "I have a dream that my 4 kids, my 4 children, will one day live in a world, in a nation where they are not judged by the color of their skin, but they're judged by the content of their character." And, I can see a slippery slope. And when you read about some of these things that are happening with this, so we need to take caution. Like you said, there's nothing like this that I'm aware of, and the parents can correct me if they're seeing this in school.
Yeah, I have not. I think part of what's happening in Guilford is you have the claim that it's happening, and then you have the left, and there's sides that are just, kind of nuts at this point. It's just you're demonized if you feel differently or what have you. That has not happened, thankfully, in Brantford. But part of the question, asking the question, is that we have members that are not going to, would be part of a civil conversation about those things, as opposed to demonizing another side. And so that's why we ask the question of every candidate that has come on these interviews so far. All right. So Laura, give us your 2-minute speech. Why would I, when going into the ballot box in November, vote for Laura Troidle?
Okay, so I think that, I'll sum it up pretty quickly. I think that with my experience as a PA, I'm going to be able to bring through a thoughtful process where I can approach a problem, bring through and analyze the problem, and bring forth solutions. It's what I do every day. I know it's different what this is an education system, but in the end, I like to bring be a positive presence on the board to be able to approach problems, address them, recognize them first, address them, analyze them, and bring forward solutions, be part of solutions by working with other people on the board and with all stakeholders, parents, and all citizens. After all, the Brantford Public Schools are important for our town. A lot of people say it's just about parents and the kids, and it's not. Yeah. It's, a good, strong school system is good for our town. It makes our town much more successful. It brings business. It helps with housing and all kinds of things. So it's very, very important that we have good public schools, or just because it's the right thing to do.
Okay. Well, Laura, again, thank you for running. I know it takes a lot of courage to put your name on a ballot and run for office and deal with these types of interviews. So I appreciate that. If we need you again, if we have questions, can we have you back on?
Absolutely. And then I want to thank you for doing this. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. To have an interest in education and the candidates to bring us forward to help people make good decisions. It's really great of you that you took the time to do this.
It's my pleasure. And thank you, Laura. Okay. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks.
Okay. So interesting hearing her thoughts. I am trying to make sure that we ask same or similar questions to all the candidates. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to answer these questions. I don't want to be, one going after one over one particular thing or one over the other. I will ask follow-up questions if they have something that raises my questions or somebody posts a question. We'll do that as well. But we want to be fair and make sure everybody has an opportunity to answer questions. This issue with CRT is interesting. And I will be honest, I've listened to multiple podcasts now that people have sent me from both sides. I've read many articles, many from the left who have questioned CRT and also how things are being taught in school. And I get it. What's happening in Guilford is a disgrace. What's happening in Guilford is you have a group of people, candidates who have said some things that are inciting anger, but they're passionate parents. I get that. And then you have a group on the left that are demonizing everyone who disagrees with them. And if you disagree with them, or you question the school system, then you're racist and you're evil and you're awful. That is contrary to any logical debate. That is contrary to any real discussion. So when we ask that question in interviews, that's really what I'm looking for. Is does somebody have a reasonable approach to this? Or are they yes or no? Has to be this way. It has to be taught this way. Teachers have leeway in a classroom, and each teacher can teach it differently. But even when we had Sean Scanlon on, and we were talking, our state rep, we were talking to him about it, the first words out of his mouth is, we don't want any kids to feel guilty. One child should not feel guilty about what happened years ago. They're not responsible for systemic racism. They're not responsible for what happened years ago. And so how do we give kids the impression and the fact that they have the ability, no matter who they are, to accomplish something and be successful in life, as opposed to one race did this to another race and somebody's responsible for it. So it's a very interesting conversation. What we're seeing in Guilford's unfortunate on both sides. It never should be happening. Somebody should be the sense of reason and logic and bring a logical discussion. What's happening there is they are demonizing each other. And parents are not professional political operatives. Parents who get involved, especially parents who get involved with passion about an issue, as opposed to always. So we have parents that are always, some parents are always involved. Some people are clearly have political agendas. I would say the parents that are involved in Guilford on that anti-CRT side are not parents that were involved before. They were not people who are political operatives. I think outside political operatives may have jumped in. On the other side of that, you have people who are names that are known politically, that have attacked the opposite side for a long time. If we step back and look at sources nationally, the Democratic, Republican side, left, right, whatever, we find that there's far more reason and logic happening by intelligent people. The interview with Bari Weiss, people saw was a podcast, was very good. Bari Weiss is a former writer, head editor, I believe, of the New York Times. Huge respect for her. I've seen Bill Maher, who certainly leans less, talk about this, not in ways you'd expect a normal Democrat or Republican to talk about it. So it's an interesting topic. We ask about it because we want to see, does someone have a reasonable, logical approach to a very difficult topic? Before we go, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the media and in the Democratic Party in Brantford. So when you're running against an incumbent like Cosgrove, who is popular and well-liked, and we talked about the letters coming from the left, the positive things he's done for the town, obviously a huge front runner. The opponents will throw basically shit against the wall and see what sticks. And so the most recent attacks is that the town is not financially sound. It is debunked fairly quickly. Standard & Poor's has a glowing review of us, a highest bond rating you can possibly get. But I want you to remember something as you look at Brantford and our finances and the way Brantford is run. The Board of Finance is 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. The chair is Joe Mooney, who's a Democrat. When Tom Brockett or the campaign manager attack the town's finances, they're attacking the Democratic leader of the Board of Finance. They're attacking the 3 Democrats who have voted for every budget and every project and everything we have going forward in town. What has been a hallmark of Brantford for especially the last 8 years is how closely they've all worked together to make the Brantford what it is today, until you get to a small group of Democrats on the RTM. But before that, in committees, in groups, on the Board of Finance, on the Board of Selectmen, things have worked extremely well. Politically, you have to yell and scream and make things up. But I'm seeing things from Kevin Coughlin, who's the kid who runs the campaign, who basically said the town's inept and can't get notices out. I mean, I don't know what planet he's on. He said he's a professional communications person. He works for the Democratic Party. If you work for a political party, you are by definition a propagandist. Your goal is to put out things that make you look favorable, things that make you look good. You're not good at informing people. You're good at spinning. And I don't knock that. I've had people try to get me jobs doing that for either party or for other organizations, for nonprofits. I've had job offers from nonprofits to do communications for them. It's propaganda. That's what they do. And so now we're seeing a ton of it coming from the Democratic side. There's a series of articles in Patch with interviews saying the town has had these huge tax increases and this town, all this debt. and that there's major cost overruns for projects. The problem with that is there's no cost overruns on any projects. Cost overruns happen during construction. They said there's a $2 or $3 million cost overrun on the animal shelter. The project just started. How could there be a cost overrun? The price changed before it started, and Mr. Brockett himself voted for it. So how do you then complain that it's higher? I don't understand what's happening on that side, but we're seeing absolute nonsense. Last year, I endorsed Robin Comey for state rep, partly because of the actions of Mark Riccio. And he had done things on social media, made statements on social media that were inappropriate, in my opinion, sexist, and inappropriate for a candidate for office. When people post things that are false on social media, when they post things that are dishonest, slanderous, lying to people, it matters who likes those posts. What you post on social media matters, but all of your actions on social media matter. If you're a candidate for office and you're liking posts that are clearly slanderous, clearly false, clearly dishonest, that matters. That tells us something about you. What you put on Twitter, what you put on Facebook, what you put on Instagram, who you like, who you follow, who you comment back to, who you recommend, matters. We're watching. And if you're going to represent the town, if you're going to represent the Board of Education, what you do matters. Okay, that's it for today. We'll be back on Monday at 4 o'clock. I think we have one more interview to do. We'll make sure once that's scheduled, we'll let you know. Until then, I hope you have an amazing weekend, and we will be back on Monday. See you at 4 o'clock. Guys, have a great